Hey, happy Friday. It's Twana with Guiding Principles Bible Study. Do you often find yourself feeling as though there's nothing left to live for? Do you feel yourself feeling as though everything you've worked for isn't really amounting to anything, or something that you've been hoping for doesn't seem to be coming? Well, today that's exactly what we're going to talk about. And we're coming out of Proverbs 13, chapter 13, verse 12. Hope deferred maketh the heart sick, but when the desire cometh, it is the tree of life. Hope is the expectation of something happening, and it's usually something good. We can have, sadly, we can have hope that goes the wrong direction, but that's not really how we would define hope, and it's not what we would call hope naturally. Hope is about the expectation of something good happening. So let me ask you something. What then is the purpose behind other people wanting to take away a person's hope? Well, you see, if a person takes away your hope, if I allow someone to steal my hope, then I have nothing to hold on to. I have nothing to keep me going and nothing to keep me energized and motivated and moving forward. And that's the thing that happens and why you so often see people taking away your hope. The way that they take away hope is very specific. Oftentimes, it involves inundating you with all the negative things that could potentially happen instead of discussing with you the options that you could have if you were to keep moving forward. So, let me give you an example. When Jesus went to the cross, everyone's hope disappeared. They thought they had followed someone who was a fake. They thought they had followed someone who was a fraud. They felt like, what have I done? How did I let myself get fooled when I thought this person was a son of God, but now he's laying dead in a coffin? How did I let this blind me? It wasn't until 3 days later, when Jesus arose, that now all of a sudden they felt that hope. And the reason is because we begin to think that we have done something wrong when things don't work out the way we have an expectation that they should work out. That's the thing that causes the problem. We often believe that there's something we should have done. Whether it got done or not, it's what we often believe. And it becomes a huge problem and a block to how we move forward. So there's something I really want to share with you today. When you're walking with the Lord, there are many times that you're going to experience disappointment. And you will read the Bible, you'll pray, you'll believe wholeheartedly that you have an answer and that you have a path and a trajectory, and you're supposed to walk that trajectory. And as you do, everything around you suddenly blows up. And then it feels as though you've been let down. It feels like God didn't show up. It feels like He didn't come through. That's not the case. And that's not what happened. And I want to go into this because too many times people get angry at God because things don't happen the way they expected that they were going to happen. And then they get angry. So, to understand this, let's go into the story of Abraham and Sarah, where when God first found them, it was Abram and Sarai. And they were childless, they had no children of their own. One day, an angel of the Lord comes and tells them, "You will have a child." He didn't say, "This time next year, you will have a child." He said, "You will have a child." And they said, "Okay." Well, the years went by. Not days, not weeks, not months, but years. And they got to the point where they thought the better alternative was for them to use Hagar, her servant, Sarah's handmaid. Well, that didn't do anything but cause a whole bunch of unnecessary drama. Unnecessary drama completely. Now they're stuck. Now they have a child that Abraham loves. but is not Sarah's. And over time, Hagar loses her mind and forgets her place. And so Sarah comes along and says, get rid of that woman and her child, especially after the birth of Isaac. You can get caught all up in the fact that Sarah said what she said, but her kid was being a brat, and she didn't have to deal with it anymore. The child of promise had come. You see, we often put ourselves into rough situations when we put a time limit on when God is supposed to do something. As we get older, we think there's no more time, there's no more this, there's no more that. But the reality isn't so. Remember, God operates outside of time. He's very clear that we are in the physical realm and that we do have time constraints, but none of the time constraints that we live with are things that he can't overcome. So my heart goes out to those of you who God has told will have a child, and then in your late 50s, you all of a sudden find out, I'm pregnant. Yeah. How many of us wanted to be raising a kid at 75? But God's timing is perfect. So if you're having a kid that you'll be raising or will be 18 by the time, or 20, by the time you're 75, it's because you're finally ready to be that child's parent. That's what it takes. It's us who slows down the process. And so when we go back to our original verse of hope deferred makes the heart sick, I want you to understand that just like with Abraham and Sarah, where the hope was deferred, they began to think it wasn't going to happen. But that's not the case with God. When he tells you something's going to happen, it will happen. It just isn't going to happen when you want it to. The funny thing and the hard thing about this, funny being ironic, the hard thing about this is as you have to sit back and you have to wait on him to bring it to fruition, it gets hard to wait. It gets really, really, really hard. And enough people are not out here talking about exactly how complicated it is to sit back and just wait on him to do what he says he's going to do. It's very frustrating. And so while you're going through this, I want you to understand something, that the Bible even warns you that this is going to come. That's why Proverbs 13 and 12 is there. And it tells you what you're hoping for when it's deferred is going to make your heart sick. You're going to think it's not going to happen. But when it comes, it is the tree of life. That means it brings you joy and elation like you have never, ever experienced in your life. You will be okay. You know, a lot of people sit back and say that Jesus isn't coming back. And you can see it in comments on videos like this and all this. Or people will say, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, blah, 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 blah. Well, the funny thing is that I very few people know as well as I do what it is to have to sit and wait on God. Because believe me when I tell you, I got stuff he told me 20 years ago I'm still waiting to see happen. And it's very frustrating because I sit back and I go, okay, I'm going to go in this direction. And every time something will snap back and make me go back in the direction that I am like trying to get away from. So I understand well what it is to wait on God. I understand the frustration that comes along with it. And so when I talk to you about this, I'm not talking to you about this based on theory. I live this usually on a daily basis. We all have things that we're hoping for. We all have things that we're waiting for. We all have things that we're waiting to see how God ultimately ends up doing them and unfolding them and bringing them to pass. But the thing that I want you to understand is this: you're going to get sick. And I don't mean physically sick. You're going to feel like it's not going to happen. That's okay. That's common, right? But what isn't okay is when you begin to believe that God isn't with you. He didn't make this happen, so it wasn't this. He didn't do this. Because let me tell you who that affects. It affects you. Not God, not Jesus, not anyone. It affects you. Because you begin to question you. And then you begin to question your relationship with the Father. And then you end up going into situations that you don't have to be in. You end up finding the Hagars in your situation that ultimately you are not going to want to deal with. You see, the thing is that when we get to a point that we no longer want to wait on God, what we do is we create situations that we really don't want to live through. And that's the problem, is that you will always create a situation that is 1,000 times worse than anything you ever imagined in your life. It's never as simple as you think it's going to be. It's always 1,000 times worse. And I want you to understand that, because that ultimately is the thing that causes you the most pain. The tree of life, when we wait, is what we're looking for. Now, you have to be also very careful what you expect from God. If you think that God told you that somebody else's husband is your husband, you got a problem. You got a problem, because he wouldn't do that. That's out of character for who he is. God does not say, I hate divorce, so that he can turn around and tell you, oh, I want you to sit tight for this divorced man. Because remember, when a person divorces, unless they divorce for all the right reasons, like adultery, or somebody stops doing their marital duty, which we all know what that is, they decide they no longer want to consummate your marriage, then they are forever in an adulterous affair. So he's not going to sit back and tell you that somebody else's husband or somebody else's wife is your spouse. It's not a conversation that he's going to have with you. He would tell you to wait, and that one day it would come. And see, that's the problem. Too many times we watch these Hollywood movies, right? And we sit back and we think, oh, I'm supposed to be married by the time I'm in my 20s. And we see people that we know within their 20s getting married and all of this. And we wonder if it's ever going to happen for us. And see, the longer it takes for it to happen to us, or the distance, the greater the distance between when our friends get married and when we find that person, oftentimes becomes a real challenge for us. We sit back and we think that it's just never going to happen. But where did this arbitrary time frame come from? Are you expecting to be dead before you're 120? Because the covenant age is 120 years old. And I love Warren Buffett. And it was actually funny because one of the young ladies, a young lady who works with me actually, she and I were engaged in conversation today, and she was sharing that she had watched a documentary on Warren Buffett and how he drinks like 6 to 8 Pepsi Cokes, excuse me, I'm sorry, Cokes. Don't let me make that mistake. Cokes per day, and then of course we all know he eats at Mickey D's every day, and he's 93. You're going to live as long as you're going to live. Why do you think your life is over before 120? George Burns, who I absolutely loved, he was in this old school movie called Oh God, and then Oh God, You Devil. And the man was 98, smoked cigars like they were going out of style. Lived to be 98 years old, smoked most of his life. Sometimes there's a purpose for you. And so your time is not limited. Then, of course, there are some who pass away early. And again, I always find it ironic when people have children and those children pass away. And what's their argument? That God is terrible and horrible because he took them. Actually, you're terrible and horrible because you will not choose to let it go. You have to make a choice. I once met a woman who had lost her son, and the pain of this loss was so fresh to her that I thought it was months ago. I later found out that it was 17, 18, 20 years ago, and it was as fresh for her 20 years later. While that was a horrifically sad experience, she lost 20 years of her life. She could have met someone new. She could have had additional children. Nobody appreciates death, but it's a part of life. If something is taken, it's not part of your future. So you get to make a choice. Are you thankful for the time that you got with that experience or that person or that individual? Or are you going to sit back and cry about the fact that they are not here right now? That's the thing that I want you to really look at. because that's the thing that will make or break you. Whatever it is that you're waiting on, it has an appointed time to come. All you have to do is keep living your life day by day, step by step. Keep yourself busy, keep yourself active, keep your faith going. Sometimes you're going to have to get together with people and you're going to have crazy faith sessions. That's okay. Do that. Because the fact of the matter is that all things that God promises you He is going to do, He will do, no matter what it seems like, no matter how long it takes. So keep hoping, keep staying in that faith, and don't let anyone come and steal your hope. All things work together for good for those who love God and are called according to His purposes. You will see whatever that vision is at its appointed time. Don't forget that. If you like this video, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so that you can know when we release more content. I look forward to seeing you next Friday.